This is SelfWork, and I'm Dr. Margaret Rutherford. At SelfWork, we'll discuss psychological and emotional issues common in today's world and what to do about them. I'm Dr. Margaret, and SelfWork is a podcast dedicated to you taking just a few minutes today for your own self-work. Hello and welcome back to SelfWork. I'm Dr. Margaret. By now, some of the major publicity folks, the folks that email me about maybe a new book or someone they're excited about, they and I have formed a relationship, and they know the kind of guest I like to have on SelfWork. So when one of them, who I know pretty well by this time, sent me a description of Bob Waldinger and called him warm and humble, I knew I wanted him on SelfWork because sometimes that's hard to find. Bob has plenty of things he could crow about, as we'd say in Arkansas. He's a Harvard professor, and he's the 20-year director of the Harvard Study of Adult Development. And his TED Talk is one of the 10 most popular of all time, with over 43 million views. I'll have those links in your show notes. What's the Harvard study all about? It's the longest scientific study of happiness ever conducted. Here's what they say. Radical for its time in 1938, this first of its kind study is now in its 84th year with an 84% retention rate. Even JFK was a participant. Bob Waldinger is understandably proud of the wide range of data they've amassed through the years, as they wanted to focus on what keeps you healthy rather than what makes you sick. And his new book, all about it, came out 3 days ago, and it's called The Good Life. It explains in detail the most common misconceptions about happiness, what social fitness is and how to exercise it, how to understand the influence of your childhood on your adult relationships, what you're likely getting wrong about achievement, and the first step you can take if you want to live a good life. We had a wonderful conversation, but not only do I hope you enjoy it, I hope that you'll learn more about what will truly bring you happiness. But first, let's hear from one of our proud sponsors. What better time than now to decide that you're going to do something for yourself in 2023 that will only add to your sense of well-being, where you can begin every single day with an act of true self-care, not a bubble bath, not even a therapy session, but by drinking one glass full of 75 high-quality minerals, vitamins, probiotics, adaptogens, and whole food source superfoods, which support everything from your gut to your immune system to your energy level. I use it every day and love this habit because if you're like me, self-care can get lost in a day full of kids, work, meals, and whatever else comes along. AG1 knows that people who listen to SelfWork are seeking to make their lives better. So Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 travel packs with your first purchase. Become your own green machine in the first hour you're up and around. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/selfwork. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/selfwork to take ownership of your health in 2023 and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. It's my honor to bring you Dr. Bob Waldinger. Well, let's talk about The Good Life.
Okay. Yeah.
It's The Good Life, and you wrote it with Mark Schultz.
Yes.
Is he another Harvard professor?
No, he's a psychology professor at Bryn Mawr College.
Oh, okay.
And we met up here at Harvard. We were both studying in the lab of a researcher who was our mentor, and that's how we got to be first colleagues and then very much close friends. And
that was evident in the book that y'all are close friends.
Yeah.
So people will know what we're talking about. The whole book was based on the Harvard Study of Adult Development, which has actually gone on from 1938 to the present. How long have you and Mark been shepherding it?
Since 2002, so 20 years.
Wow.
I'm the fourth director, so my 3 predecessors were really dogged and persistent in making sure this study continued.
reading it was affirming because a lot of the things that I've learned as a therapist were in there, and some of the things I've learned personally, but you could back it up with all this, research and questionnaires. And speaking about dogged, these people who go out and are interviewed or who are interviewing, and then those people who have hung in there and allowed their lives to be, not microscopically looked over, but at least, lots of detail and lots of personal revelation.
Yes. And we say to our participants, you are giving a gift to the world. You're giving a gift to science by doing this, because they really are.
Yeah.
Because it's so unique. I mean, no other study has studied people over 85 years, entire lives. And so when we try to encourage people, please don't drop out, and most people haven't, we encourage them by saying nobody can replace you. And this is such a precious gift you're giving.
I would totally agree with that. And you mentioned some other studies that are longitudinal over time, but obviously this one is the longest. And I have several favorite quotes. I have 8 pages of notes here. We won't go through all 8 pages. When I write, I learn things. I love this one. A good life is forged from the very things that make it hard. Loved that quote. You say, we're terrible at predicting what will make us happy. And the whole study is about what really leads to happiness, what is truly the core of happiness. And so if you just talk about that, and I'll interject when I can.
Absolutely. So what we found was actually the core of the book is that finding. We found that relationships are the kind of bedrock of well-being. And so, rather than thinking about happiness, which is more a momentary up and down kind of feeling, like I'm happy right now talking with you, but I might not be happy an hour from now if something troubling happens. Sure. But this bedrock of well-being, what we found is that the people who paid close attention to and invested in connections with other people as they went through their lives, those were the people who stayed the healthiest as well as the happiest.
So, and that's very tangible evidence.
Yes. And we have, thousands of lives now that we've studied, and all the evidence points to this as well as other studies. Because as you know, no single study of this kind can prove anything by itself. But when several studies, many studies point in the same direction, then we can feel pretty confident about it.
And so what makes us terrible at predicting what would make us happy? What are the factors? Because you say that several times in the book. We're horrible predictors.
Yeah. There are many factors. One, I think, is all the messaging we get from our culture and that we accidentally give each other all day long. So think about the messages we get about what will make us happy if you buy certain things. If you use this face cream, you'll always look young and be bright and energetic. If you serve this pasta to your family, you'll have wonderful family dinners all the time, right? You get these messages, visual, in advertising about buying things. And if you buy the right things, you'll be happier. Similarly, we end up kind of curating our lives for each other, especially on social media.
Yeah, that's interesting.
If you ever go to Facebook or Instagram and you see what people post, I mean, I don't post the pictures of myself in the morning when I wake up, feeling lousy, right? Feeling depressed or feeling like I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I post the pictures where we're at a beautiful, happy dinner or we're on a beach and we know that we do that, but then when we look at each other's lives, you can accidentally get the impression, oh my gosh, those people have a great life. Those people have it figured out, and I don't. And I think that leads us to believe that money, achievement, going to all the beautiful places are the core of what's going to make us happy. And that's why we lose sight of this fact that investing in relationships, which is less glamorous and longer term, that's going to make us, bottom line, more content with our lives.
You said something about we judge each other internally
Oh,
because of
yeah.
externally? I don't
One
have
of my
that.
teachers taught me that
That's
saying.
right. What is
It's
it?
we're always comparing our insides to other people's outsides.
That's it. That's it. I
And
thought
that,
that
that
was
it's a
really profound.
comparison. Yeah. And it doesn't, when we do it all, I do it all the time.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what about this study has surprised you,
Hmm.
if anything?
Yes. Well, I mean, first of all, this finding about relationships surprised me because, yes, I know that the mind and the body are connected, but really this strongly connected, like that loneliness could be as powerful as cigarette smoking or obesity for breaking down your health. Like, wow, how could
And
that
I
be?
want to point out this is backed up by tangible medical information.
Lots of data, lots of scientific studies. I mean, this is hard science here. And then another thing that surprised me and encouraged me was how different the life paths are that people took and were happy and were content, right? There's so many ways to live a life. And that means that there's so many opportunities to be on your own path. There's a Joseph Campbell quote that I love. Joseph Campbell, who wrote The Power of Myth,
Mm-hmm.
he said, if the path before you is clear, you're probably on somebody else's path. And
I love that.
you know, and we find that, with our study, like you probably saw all the stories and all the life stories in the book, which are real life stories. They're disguised
They're
to protect
fascinating.
privacy, but and these life stories are all so different, and they're not all happy and content. Certainly not all the time. And I think the surprise for me was first how many different ways there are to have a happy life, and also that it's never too late. That's one of the things we learned, that when we followed people through their whole lives, sometimes in their 60s or their 70s, for the first time, they found love or they found a group of friends when they never thought they'd find that. And so, for me, it's the most hopeful message for those of us who can think, it's too late for me. I'm just not any good at this. Not true. According to our study.
Yeah. But, for the skeptics out there, maybe you should talk about just what a participant agrees to do and during the 60 years there in the program. Can you kind of tell people what is it that you do with these participants so that you have all this data?
Yeah. We do so many things. We started out with interviews and medical exams when they were teenagers, and we went to their homes and interviewed their parents. And then we asked them to fill out questionnaires about their lives. Every 2 years, we go and interview them in their homes. We eventually started using modern measures. So we drew blood for DNA. Like in 1938, DNA wasn't even imagined.
No.
And now we're studying their DNA. We put people into the MRI scanner and look at how their brains work. There are all these ways that we try to get at the big question of what helps people thrive as they go through life.
Mm-hmm. And even live longer.
Yes.
And healthier.
Yes.
Right. By the way, I don't think my brain was functioning at all when I was in my 20s. I think it was stuck.
Our brains were just functioning differently because that's the other thing I want to name, which is that, I used to think, gee, once I'm in my 20s and I choose, if I'm lucky and I find a partner, which I did, and I find a job that I like, which I did, then I'm done. I'm kind of cooked. I'm developed, right? Mm-hmm. And that's so not the case. And when we study lives, think about how much you have changed during your adult life. Mm-hmm. And how much your sense of yourself and your sense of what life's about has changed from the time you were in your 20s.
Sure.
So adult development turns out to be this really rich time of change and growth that we can sometimes forget about because, when we look at children, child development is so clear. It happens right before our eyes. Adult development is more subtle. It takes longer. And so I've loved being able to study this area
Oh,
of
sure.
human life.
Well, come to think of that, you and Mark in the book divide up. You say that you're living a lifetime of relationships, and you start with adolescence and then young adulthood, midlife, and late life. And I have another quote that I love. The unexpected is ordinary. So that was a good one.
Yeah.
With adolescence being about walking the tightrope, you called it, making friends, leaving family, staying close to family, all that kind of turmoil. And then young adulthood is kind of creating a safety net and making sure your development isn't what you call arrested. It's your competency and intimacy are the two goals. And midlife is generativity, expanding our concern beyond self. And then later life, which I'm in,
Me too.
you really do, you're happier than you've ever been. And that I've heard that for a long time.
Yeah. Isn't that surprising?
Yeah.
I mean, when I looked, when I was younger and I looked at older people, I thought, oh, that must be so gloomy.
Yes.
That must be so depressing. And no, I am happier now than I've ever been, and I'm in my early 70s. And so, yeah.
What about diversity? You mentioned in the book how the originators of the study tried to build into the study more diversity, because the original group was Harvard students, which was back in 1938, probably a lot of white men, and all of them. And so you went to a rough neighborhood in Boston, I think, and actually pulled together some participants from there. But I also still wondered about how you've tried to commingle diversity, or make sure that as the study has progressed, it's more and more diverse.
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, yes, we went to Boston's poorest neighborhoods and also the most troubled families to try to look for kids who were having healthy developmental paths, even though they were in difficult situations growing up. And about half of those kids were from immigrant families. So not everybody was, a Boston native. A lot of people from the Middle East, from Eastern Europe, from other parts of the world. And then when I came on board, we brought in women. We brought in first the partners of our original men, and then we've reached out to the second generation, more than half of whom are women. So we've got more diversity, both, in terms of social class, in terms of ethnic origin, and then gender. We've broadened it. What we haven't done, and we find it difficult to do, is broaden it to, for example, what looks like diversity now: African Americans, Latinos, people of other sort of populations that we now think of as so important in our culture. And the reason why we haven't is that we are unique. We are an important study because we have all these years of back information. If we bring in a new group of people now, we won't have that.
Right.
So what we're doing is we're saying, okay, we're going to leave it to our colleagues, to other researchers, to study people of color, to study people in different parts of the globe, to look at these same things. So that's where we're hoping that the field keeps heading toward more and more diversity. Yeah,
that makes sense. Rather than trying to start all over, but you might contaminate the data you have now if you do that. Yeah, I get it. I loved the chapter distinctions because really it did focus me as the reader on, okay, what are we talking about now? And then you call it social fitness, meaning your ability to be in relationship well with other people. Would that be a good definition of that?
Yeah.
Okay. And there are 3 different designations. You want to be able to give and receive, risk, and you use the metaphor of learning new dance steps. And then this one I really loved, radical curiosity.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yes. Well, this idea of social fitness came to us because we saw that many people didn't take care of their relationships. And what happened was that perfectly good relationships withered away. So friendships, right? My high school friend or my college friends or my army buddies, whatever it might be. And it wasn't because anybody was unhappy or angry. It was that we just didn't pay attention. And so what we began to see was that what was needed, and the healthiest people did this, was a more active approach. Like realizing I haven't seen my friend in a couple of weeks or a month. I'm going to reach out and see if she wants to, or a year, reach out, see if she wants to get together, go for a walk, or at least have a chat. That active approach is what we're thinking of as social fitness, and that it's a practice. It's like physical fitness. If you go to the gym today, you don't come home and say, good, I've done that, I'm done, I don't ever have to do that again. No, we think of it as an ongoing practice. And what we'd like to encourage people to think about is their relationships as an ongoing treasure that you want to help maintain.
What if someone's listening and says, but I'm depressed and I don't have the energy to be proactive, or I get anxious, when I'm around I've gotten more anxious as I've grown older. Did you try to assess what level of mental issues or dynamics or emotional dynamics that they were struggling with was actually, within the participants?
We did assess that. We assessed how many people got depressed before age 50. And there was a sizable percentage, because as we know, 1 in 5 people has an episode of depression in their lifetime. So we did assess that. And I think you're raising a really important point, which is that emotional distress, mental illness can make us not feel like or not be able to reach out to other people. And that's a really important reason. That's one more important reason for getting the mental health care that's available, to try to lift yourself out of that depression or ease that anxiety so that you're freer to take the risk of reaching out to somebody you'd like to meet, or even just recontacting an old friend. When we're depressed, we think, oh, nobody's going to want to hear from me. And so it really is a challenge. And so what I would say, and I know you would say this too professionally, that take care of your mental health, because that will enable you to take care of your relationships.
Well, and I'm thinking as you talk that the very act of reaching out to a therapist is about connection.
Absolutely.
And so how often have I, as my patient and I've been talking, to say, well, they've said, I've just enjoyed being in relationship with you. And I said, so where could you get this kind of trust or, this kind of ability to be in the relationship outside of the therapeutic relationship? You want to generalize it to their just daily life. Well, you've talked about Sally or Felicia, could you perhaps reach out to them? So I think in the process of connecting with a therapist that you begin to challenge yourself. I'm not going to be rejected because I'm depressed. It's not so unusual for people to be anxious. There are a lot of anxious people. Right. So you can kind of normalize what you're going through rather than saying I have something wrong with me that is going to keep me out of a reliable and meaningful connection with other people.
Yes. And just the experience of coming to trust a therapist, realizing that the therapist accepts you, doesn't judge you, can set the stage for saying, okay, this is possible. There may be other people out there in the world who will accept me.
Yeah, exactly.
And be interested. And that's, I want to get back to what you asked about with radical curiosity. But we found that the people who were the best at both maintaining existing relationships and making new ones were the people who were curious. Because if you think about it, everybody feels flattered when you're genuinely interested in them, when you're curious. Tell me about yourself. Tell me, what's that like? What's your work like? Or, what's that hobby you have that you love so much? Tell me more about it, right? That if we bring that curiosity, we immediately get somebody interested in connecting with us, because people love to talk about themselves.
Sure.
So we're saying, even with a stale relationship, if you think about it, at family gatherings, sometimes you have family members and you say, I know this person so well and I know what they're going to say and I don't have it, try to learn something new. Be curious. Like,
now, what's the
ask
question?
yourself,
What's here that I haven't noticed before?
exactly. What's here that was one of my meditation teachers' instruction. And it really works with relationships, so you're sitting across from that cousin who, always tells corny jokes and just, and you just think, oh, here we go again. Just ask yourself, what's here with this person that I've never noticed? And it becomes a really interesting exercise that can lead you to some new kind of conversations.
There could not be a better lead in for my next comment, which is because the radical curiosity leads to this kind of attention. You're paying attention to someone. And you say attention is the most basic form of love. I also just reveled in that because I think that, I work a lot with couples too, and sometimes they'll say we're so lonely, even though we're partnered, that because I don't feel like you really attend to me. I don't feel like you're attuned to me. When we're all sitting around a table and everybody's looking at their cell phones, no one is attending to the other person. In fact, they're not purposefully perhaps, but unintentionally shutting them out. And so, I think that's such a clue, again, tied in with that radical curiosity.
Well, and it's the greatest gift we have to give somebody. Your undivided attention, and it's getting more and more rare because, as you say, we have these screens that just capture our attention and hold it. And so if we can, like, I have to tell myself, okay, I'm sitting here working at my laptop. When my wife comes and wants to say something to me, I have to say to her, okay, I'm going to stop whatever I'm doing. I'm going to turn, I'm going to look at my wife and I'm going to listen. Right? It's a practice and we can do it, but it really means being intentional about it. Mm-hmm. And I have to be intentional every day. It's not something that comes naturally to me, but it really works.
Mm. And that's all tied in with showing affection. And some people are very comfortable with that and some people are not. And so, do you have any hints about how to become more comfortable with being affectionate with other people? I mean, what does the study show about maybe a part of your life where you could not and then you did, or you learned how to?
Yeah. Many people learn how to by being with someone who expresses affection. Yes. And by being with someone who expresses appreciation. Because as you know, if we didn't grow up in situations where people were affectionate, where people expressed appreciation, you don't learn it. Mm-mm. And in fact, it may feel foreign. And many of our folks found partners or good friends who were just warm and affectionate. And they learned how warming that can be, how nurturing that can be. And then they started to learn to do it. And I think, so there are things we can do. They've done a lot of research on expressing gratitude. And that what they find is that people who even write down in a journal what they're grateful for, are happier. Mm-hmm. It makes them happier. And if they express that gratitude to someone, mm-hmm. it makes them happier still. So,
no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, sometimes what I've done is I've challenged people. Think about someone you're grateful to, but you really haven't told them in a while, or you haven't told them as much as you'd like to. Yeah. And just reach out to them right now. And people will come back and say, oh my gosh, people were so touched. They were so happy I reached out. They were, and so what you notice is that if you start expressing affection, expressing gratitude, expressing appreciation, you will get so much back. So expressing that, including just smiling at people.
Yeah.
I mean, if you smile at the person who checks you out at the grocery store, or, that ends up starting something that can end up in a very pleasant conversation. And certainly in a classroom, in a workplace, mm-hmm. that can have huge positive effects.
A Questions coming to me that I didn't even think about as I was reading the book, but you follow especially two men. I know one's name was Leo. I'm trying to remember the other one.
And John.
John. I was thinking it was Joe, but I knew that one right. John. And John is what you describe as probably the least happiest person you followed. And Leo is the most happy. How, as a clinician, did you learn all of this and not want to somehow intercede?
Oh, boy, you're right. I mean, I did want to intercede for John. I will say that at one point, John came to us saying, my wife and I are having so much trouble in our relationship. Can you find us a couples therapist? And we did that.
Oh,
so
good.
We are not a hands-off research project.
Okay.
I think it's one of the reasons,
that would be hard.
It'd be hard to be hands-off. And I think also it's one of the reasons why our participants have stayed in the study. They've remained loyal to us because we do that.
You show personal interest.
Mm-hmm. We show personal interest and we try to help when people are hurting. Not too much. And we don't like, I didn't do the therapy myself, but I found them a good couples therapist.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a question. How did you account for the idea that when people are studied, they change? You know, when you're studying someone, when you're observing them, that actually changes what you're observing.
Such a good question. We weren't a hands-off study. And that's scientifically, the ideal is to have a completely clean, antiseptic, sterile field in which you observe. An experiment that's so controlled. We didn't do that because it's almost impossible to do adult developmental research and not affect the people you're studying.
Sure.
We asked people at one point. It was a question we asked everybody. How does being in this study affect you? Some people said it was just annoying. I hated all your questions. And some people said, no, it didn't affect me at all. But many people said, this was very important. It made me take stock of my life. And I knew that at regular intervals, I was going to get these questions that were going to get me to think about what's important in my life and where my life is going. And so we undoubtedly changed their lives.
You just can't not. Yeah.
We couldn't not.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I get it. People love models. And you have this wiser model, which is watch, interpret, select, engage, and reflect. That's wiser. And it's all about, how to attach to people well. And this is maybe my very favorite quote, about watching. It says, don't just do something, sit there.
Yes. Which we do as therapists a lot, right?
I laughed out loud when I read that.
Yeah. Well, the wiser model is a way to slow down a challenge. So if you think about it, personal challenges are always coming at us. Like somebody does something and you don't know why they did it. And then you find your mind is filling in the blank. So, one example is my boss sends me a note saying, I have to talk to you right away. And I don't know why. Don't know more information. Well, that's a blank screen. And I find my mind putting in all kinds of,
You start telling yourself stories.
Tell myself stories. Oh my gosh, he's going to fire me. Or what have I done wrong? Or, and so what the wiser model does is it says when somebody does something and you're not sure what's happening or why they did it, slow it down with these steps. So watch, first of all, gather all the information you can, then interpret, like say, well, what are the possible interpretations? Maybe my boss isn't mad at me. Maybe he's not going to fire me. Maybe there's something else going on. And then select responses. So my response to my boss's note could be, I'm sorry, I don't have time, but how well would that work? Or I could say, so I can have these different responses. Ideally it would be, sure, when would you like to meet? Or,
Yeah.
And that, so we select our response and then we engage. So then I do something, I meet the response. It could be just asking for more information. Like you did that thing at the party and it upset me. Can you tell me more about it? Or can you tell me what was going on for you? So you engage in that way. You pick a response, like could be just to be more curious. And then you reflect. You say, okay, how did that work? Did it work to avoid my boss and never meet with him? Well, no, that didn't work so well.
Right,
did it work just to use my story and get mad at this person who did something I didn't understand? No, that didn't work so well. And so it's a way, essentially, it's just a way to slow down those moments when you can, when you're confused, when what's happening is uncertain, and you need to spend some time paying more attention so that you don't end up sending that angry email and then realize that nobody was meaning you any harm, right? You don't end up getting angry at your sister because she offended you when she absolutely meant no offense.
Right. Not assuming, motivation or intention.
Yeah.
I could ask you so many more questions, but you talk about getting unstuck, where you're constructing your reality with the things you believe and the things you feel that are harmful to you or not harmful to you that are actually good for you. Can you talk a little bit about what you feel like, how people can get unstuck?
Well, we all do get stuck. We get caught in certain patterns of behavior, like with our partner or with a sibling, where we're stuck in these roles. We can get stuck at work with a relationship with a boss or a coworker. And I think a lot of times we can find our way out of that stuck place. Sometimes just by paying more attention to other possibilities, sometimes by talking to a trusted friend, but then sometimes it's by finding a therapist. Many people get stuck and then get unstuck in their lives without getting any kind of therapy. But sometimes we need therapy. And so, for example, I was stuck. As a young man, my 20s, I had long relationships with people and they weren't working out, and I thought I'm never going to find a partner because it doesn't work out. And I realized that I wasn't working this out on my own. So I found a therapist, and boy, was that helpful.
Yeah.
Because that therapist was able to help me understand the patterns I was getting into. And
see the bigger picture.
The bigger picture. And then I got unstuck and have had I've been married for 36 years and it seems to be working out pretty well.
Speaking of work, you also talk about the importance of having a best friend at work and that we spend so much time at work. Now, of course, the pandemic changed a lot of that with more in-house kinds of working. Some people are trying to go back. Some people are not. But even after the pandemic, do you think that that's still important, that the work relationship chapter that you talked about?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, we spend so much of our waking life at work. And so the idea that we don't have anybody who we know personally or who knows us is so lonely. And as we talked about in the book, they did a study asking millions of workers, do you have a best friend at work? Do you have anybody who knows you personally? Only 3 out of 10 said they had a best friend.
Oh, wow.
And those people were happier. They were more productive workers. They were less likely to change jobs because work was a place they wanted to go to because they had friends. And so I think what we're finding, and again, many other studies are finding that focusing on your relationships, could just be 1 or 2 relationships at work, can make a huge difference in your happiness and your engagement in your work life. And even remotely, we hopefully will find ways to do that with each other.
Yeah, I hope so too. So I want to show the book again. It's The Good Life, Lessons from the world's longest scientific study of happiness create a more meaningful and satisfying life. And I just am so honored to have you on. And please tell Mark Schultz that I wish he could have been with us. I would have loved to have met him too, but I really appreciate it. I know your book's coming out January the 10th, and this will air 3 days after that. So thank you so much, Bob.
Well, thank you, Margaret. This is a pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Take care. I want to thank you for being here today. You can email me at askdrmargaret@drmargaretrutherford.com. You can check me out on Instagram. I love to post there. And of course, my book, Perfectly Hidden Depression, is available. Thank you once again for being here. Please take very, very good care of you, the people you love, and of your community. I'm Dr. Margaret, and this has been SelfWork.